My name is Max, and I'm a postgraduate student at the University of Cape Town. And I'm currently completing my master's in law, and I'm specializing in criminology. My current area of research focuses on abused women, specifically the legal defenses available to them when they take the law into their own hands, in cycles of abuse cases, when society fails them, and they feel compelled and that there is no other decision but to kill their abusers. And I think that they deserve a legal defense. And I'll give you the example of Miss Anna-Marie Engelbrecht, a seminal case. After decades of abuse at the hands of her husband, emotional, psychological, physical, sexual, she reached a turning point. She had tried to leave him, she tried to appease him, she tried to divorce him, she tried to call the authorities on him, she tried to get a restraining order on him. After one particular evening of brutality, and after he threatened her daughter, she killed him in his sleep. She was found guilty of murder, but the court sentenced her to 5 minutes of court-based detention. It was a symbolic gesture by the court that they recognized that the abuse that she'd endured was punishment enough. It is a controversial topic, but I think it's one that is long overdue for mainstream discussion. And though it doesn't directly relate to queer issues, there's an intersectionality between women's rights and queer rights that cannot be ignored. And one of the salient points from my research that is pertinent in this discussion on sexuality is the realities of a community whose rights to safety and security are not met, and the trauma that ensues. So one evening, I was scrolling through my Instagram feed, as we all do, and an image of a woman crossed my feed. Another murder victim reported by the Keep the Energy Instagram page. And it was no anomaly. This page has daily posts recognizing the lives lost to gender-based violence. It's a page that was started as a dedication to the wave of protest action that gripped our country when Uyinene Mrwetyana was senselessly murdered in an act of gender-based brutality. Her story had an enormous impact on me, as it did so many of our young UCT women. For the first time, maybe, we saw so much of ourselves in a victim. She studied where we studied. She lived where we lived. She frequented the places where we went. She skipped class at the same times that we did. I think it's a necessary survival strategy of the human condition to separate ourselves from trauma. It allows us to go about business as usual. And I recognize that my privilege as a white, upper-class, straight-passing woman has afforded me ample time to enjoy that bubble. But it was shattered that day, and it has been shattered since. The Keep the Energy Instagram page posts daily, and each one of their posts strikes at the very heart of a pandemic that has plagued this country for decades. South African women are no strangers to pandemics. On this day, her name was Tapelo, a 23-year-old woman from Limpopo. She was murdered, and the suspected motive was her sexuality. And though I know nothing more about her, and recognize that we exist worlds apart, I was struck, as I was with Uyinene's story. Here was a young queer woman with all of the potential in the world at 23. I am a young queer woman with all the potential in the world at 23. So today I'm going to briefly be talking about the legal space surrounding the LGBTQI movement in South Africa, one that's been praised globally. And whilst that praise is deserved, I want us to all remember Tapelo, because it's the discord between our very progressive laws and stories like hers that must spur us on in the effort to achieve true equality. So we've all heard about the greatness of our Constitution, and it heralded the dawn of democracy. And it's been praised for its progressiveness, and for good reason too. We were the first country in the world to list sexual orientation as a ground in outlawing discrimination in our constitution, the first in the world. We were the 5th country to legalize same-sex marriage. We have rights protecting against discrimination in the workplace via the Employment Equity Act, in private spaces via PAPUDA. We have legal rights for queer couples to adopt, to donate blood, to be in the military, for queer parents to obtain leave. The list goes on. And it's no secret that the apartheid era was very, very different. As was typical of the time, sexuality and gender were treated with the brutality and prejudice inherent in that political regime. And transgender rights were equally non-existent. Queerness in the military was met with invasive pseudoscience medical procedures and conversion tactics. And our legal system has made leaps of progress since. But just because the laws of a country change does not mean that the landscape changes. And so in making the case for a free and fair South Africa without homophobia and transphobia, it's our landscape that must change. And I want to make the argument that it may actually be a return to Southern African perceptions of gender and sexuality, not a deviation. I do not want to generalize pre-colonial Africa. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie warns of the danger of a single story. But the story of prejudice against sex and gender is a colonial one. And changing our current cultural prejudice and binary understanding of gender is an act of decolonization. And I want to reference a few examples. Before European domination, the Yoruba culture, which is now in modern-day Nigeria, gave very little importance to gendering in society. The main biological feature of hierarchy was age, and the binary understanding of man and woman was only relevant insofar as reproduction was concerned. Dr. Oyoronke Oyewumi, in her work on Yoruba culture, makes it clear that the binary understanding of gender was first imposed by the colonial state. And that's certainly true for South Africa as well. Roman, Dutch, and English colonizers were the first to impose the assimilation of patriarchal norms into various Southern African cultures. In South Africa, they brought the common law that prohibited sodomy, including what they deemed unnatural sexual offenses between two men. And so the idea of opposing binaries, man, woman, heterosexual, beginning to raise generations that do not make the mistake to think that there is moral indignation in otherness. And importantly, we must not make the mistake to think that that moral indignation against queer folk only exists in small pockets of society or in the older generations. It's pervasive on every level, in government, to the public sector, to the private. It exists when our children are born and their gender dictates their recreational activities or even the color of their wombs. When little boys are told to be a man when they get emotional, or young girls are expected to marry young and reproduce before the age of 30. It existed when perhaps many, even most of your parents expected certain things of you because of the genitalia that you were born with. It existed when I walked hand in hand with my then girlfriend in public and either got snide remarks or fetishizing looks from mostly men who were twice our age, sometimes 3 times our age. I think back to Tapelo, the 23-year-old queer woman. And I stand before you because of my sexuality, and I'm praised for it. And I mourn the lives like hers who were taken because of her sexuality. The law has made great strides in securing rights for everyone, but unless we make an effort to ensure that those rights are realized, they will remain a pipe dream for all. So what can we each do? It starts small. I know it's uncomfortable, but it's as small as correcting a family member who makes a homophobic remark during Christmas time. It's as small as using someone's pronouns correctly, or correcting people who incorrectly use pronouns. It's as small as raising your children to know that should they ever need to come out, they will be met with loving arms and accepting words. As one speaker said today, we need to raise people to see things not as a disease, but as divine design. I want to thank you for your time today, and I want to extend special thanks to Professor Moholi and Dr. Baja. What a privilege it has been to speak with you all today and learn from you all today. Thank you.